What does that mean?
I don't know. No. Well, I know of one person who follows me on Google Plus. Hey, everybody, we're live. This is late night bedtime with Batman. A little bat chat with a mysterious bat figure. Can you say hello, Batman?
Hi, I'm Batman. Hey!
Wednesday's Batman.
There you go, Wednesday's Batman. It's like Wednesdopia.
Wednesdopia tonight
For
here
those
on
who
the Sleepy
remember.
Radio channel. So, yeah, Matt is becoming a deep Batman scholar, or in progress. As I
It's a-
understand it, reading lots of Grant Morrison Batman. But before
yes.
that, you were reading, I know you were reading some of those early Legends of the Dark Knight Batmans and other runs like Batman Year 2 and
Well, I was reading Legends mostly because that's where you pointed me.
right towards
And
Prey and Venom and things like that.
right, and also with that, I read the Matt Wagner Batman stuff, Monster Men, and
Was there one called Faces by Matt Wagner, or was that by someone else?
yeah, no. He has three. It's Faces, but Faces is kind of just like a random one that's like a retelling of the first Two-Face story, which is
Oh,
the
okay.
worst one because it's the most obvious one. But yeah, Monster Men, and then Man Bat I can't remember the other one for the life of me right now. But the Mad Monk. That's it.
That rings a faint bell. I mean, I
Yeah.
read all of those when they came out. I would like to track them down. In fact, I just bought the digital versions of the Venom books because I want to read them on my vacation, even though I probably have them somewhere in a box. Or I might not. I don't even know.
That's the true trap of digital. uh, but yeah, no, and those Matt Wagner ones play into. I consider them an unofficial Legends Batman's book because the initial chunk of that run was all the first year of Batman until it slowly morphed into just being the fifth monthly Batman book of its day or whatever.
Right. At first, it was not part of the Batman, the regular Batman universe, and then at some point they turned it into part of it.
Yeah, so. And I didn't read that far, but yeah, I read some of
But
that. I
anyway,
read
so compared to most of us in the past 2 months, you've been reading a lot of extra Batman, I would say.
yes, and the big one that I want to shout out for people to go find is Batman Year 2. That is
Right. Which I've
excellent.
also bought digitally and will read over my vacation.
Was it collected or did you have to look up the issues?
Uh, it might have been collected, but they had that 99-cent Batman sale going on, so I just looked up the issues. Remember, I was asking you on Gmail what issues it was, and then I did the obvious and went to Wikipedia and found out for myself.
I do want to warn people because they do have that dollar an issue thing, but there's a few collections that they have for $3. So if you're looking at like Year 1 or The Long Halloween or The Dark Knight Strikes.
Right, and they have one of the Grant Morrison collections, Batman and Robin, for $3 or $4 too.
Yeah, Batman and Son.
I might get that before the sale's over.
But yeah, those are like $4 for the collection, but they're selling
Right.
the issues for $1 as well. They don't point you in that direction. Like, come
I know
on.
they don't. Yeah. I don't think the Year 2 was in there, but it might have been. But Year 2 was only 4 issues. I don't know. I'm not going to worry about that.
You know, it's 4 issues, and then there's a follow-up later that's a special that I don't know if they have there or not because it's kind of an obscure one-shot now. So
Is it a detective issue or a Batman issue or something separate?
no, it's a separate like one-shot thing, like the Reaper Strikes or something.
Huh.
Like I'd have to, I don't know.
I mean,
Yeah.
back then they used to just embed these things within the regular comics usually. That's why I asked. But
Yeah,
so,
I think this was a 80-page prestige format, sort of, you know. Because they did that a lot more back in the day, too, that they don't do now.
shall we talk about the Batman books we picked up today?
The current stuff that people care about? Sure.
And then for people who want to, slog through even more of a long live video, we can then talk about other random Bat stuff.
That's totally fair.
So this will in part be this part of this will be my weekly Batman video. Bat Dead Break or something. So I got Batman Eternal and Batman and Robin. Those were my 2 Bat books. But you probably also got Batman Endless Year Zero.
Yeah. So I have Eternal. I have Batman and Robin. I got this freebie.
Oh, right.
And Comics 27.
Didn't have the freebie.
No, I don't know how. And then, Year Zero. And what's weird is when I went up to the counter for this one, the dealer was like, "Are you sure you want the cover?" Because I had the other ensemble cover, which was just kind of weird looking. He showed me this, and I was like, "I'll take that one." 'Cause I'm normally bigger on ensemble covers, but it wasn't very well done. So, I don't know. But I imagine you wanted to start with Beternal?
Sure. I don't know that I like that cover a lot. I liked this issue, particularly the coloring, and I like the coloring on the cover.
I thought it was an interesting cover. I kind of like it because it's a little different, but I imagine because it was this week, they had to have a, like Batman-only Batman cover, whereas it should have been a Batwing cover, frankly.
That's true. That's true.
Who's growing on me?
Batwing's growing on. Well, he's a little more interesting here, although he still doesn't have a lot of personality, but...
Well, fair, but he has a lot more than what I gave him credit for before.
Well, it's a very interesting idea to put him up against the supernatural.
Yeah.
It was kind of clever, that moment where the Joker's daughter somehow takes control of his armor and pretends to be him talking to Batman and telling him there's no problems.
Well, and the way she played, like, my father said, my father does this, my father does that, and puts it more in, like, a daughter-father thing, I thought really helps separate her from Harley Quinn in a way, and this is the issue where I kind of get the idea of the character a little bit more.
Right.
I'm still not convinced it's a good idea, but I'm at least along for the ride now.
And she's never met the Joker, right? She's just an insane person who thinks that she's the Joker's daughter.
Yeah, she's been in a handful of comics only, right? Like the Suicide Squad, her one special, one Batman issue, and then this.
Right.
Maybe something else. I don't know. It's
Yeah, very very little. And I just heard people talking about her Villains Month issue. But I gathered that she has no real connection to the Joker except in her own mind.
Well, and the face.
And the face that she found, which is a little... That face is going to bother me as years go by.
Well, how long can it last?
I'm sure it would have rotted 3 or 4 times over already.
Yeah.
I wonder if... I guess you wouldn't grow new skin if your skin has been entirely removed.
Yeah, I don't know about that. That's what they can do next week, is they can hand out Joker masks for people to put on.
They should have a Joker birthday.
Well, it was interesting because they have that Batman 75th anniversary. They have like a hardbound, like, best of Batman stories kind of thing. And they have a Joker one being released as well. So, 75 years of the Joker, which doesn't make sense because the Joker should be at least, 2 years behind? So...
Yeah, he should be. Right, yeah, he definitely, I don't know when he arrived, but it was definitely of...
Well, it was Batman 1, which was after Detective 27, but how much longer exactly, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'd have to look it up. Well, back to Batman Eternal, one interesting thing that I thought about this is... like at the end of the last issue, I thought Mr. Begone? I forget what his name was. They don't actually say his name in this issue, but I assume that's him at the beginning. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Roughly, yeah.
I thought we were being revealed who the big bad behind all of this was. But then he just seems to be some minor thing. And we've got the Joker's daughter, but she's not the big bad. She's working for someone else.
Well, you'd hope that would have been, whew.
And then we get this big guy who is just the vessel. There seems to be so many layers of people here.
Well, and then you get
kind of an odd structure to a story.
You get what's this guy in the Harper Row and Robin?
Right, and I think we saw him once or twice before, briefly, like maybe now 10 issues ago or something. This guy with a monkey. But
yeah, well,
someone told me he's the character who we saw in Zero Year, but since I haven't read Zero Year yet.
No, yeah. Well, I know we're gonna get the big reveal because this feels like a B story to the main Batman stuff going on. So the best I feel we're gonna get is a solid tie to the grander scheme.
Right. And on the last page, now I'm being a big spoiler, they find out it's someone named Deacon Blackfire, but I don't know if that's really him or just another layer of bad guys with another bigger bad person behind him.
Well, I'm sure this is a guy that's roped in for his own motivations or whatever to have that mystical point to tie to that one thing with Gordon that unravels or whatever. He's probably
think this ties into what.
Well, it has to.
Happened to Gordon?
Well, that first issue, there's that whole bit about like that shot that causes Gordon to go to jail and all that. He sees something, then something happens that's clearly mystical. I wouldn't say it's normally clearly mystical, but the fact that they're having this whole angle here and the fact that that was a particular weird frame sequence leads me to think that that's a tie. Plus, they've alluded to that in here as such, so...
Well, it seemed just like I would have assumed it was just someone who could create illusions that gave him the illusion of the person that he shot at.
Yeah, who knows? The tie I'm curious about right now is Harper Rose wearing a grifter mask. And I'm wondering if that's going to
really weird. And they're just running around Tokyo, right? So why is she protecting her identity? Who's she protecting her identity from all of a sudden? Well, or she just wants to be a superhero.
It seems like good practice. Also, from what I understand, the grifter mask, if it is indeed that, actually has other properties, because I've seen scenes where like Grifter gets caught in like a gas attack and he's able to hold it because it has some sort of factor.
Oh, you think it's the actual Grifter mask?
Well, it couldn't be the actual Grifter mask because that's red, right?
Right. And does the Grifter mask have the same eye holes?
Yeah, that's kind of what makes it the Grifter mask, is that eye design with the little, like, almost anime-looking...
Okay, so it specifically looks like the Grifter mask beyond the fact that it's just this loose mask hanging there.
Yeah, I mean, the cut, the eyes on it, the only thing that isn't is the color. And the fact that Harper Rowe's wearing it. And it's a Batman comic and not a Grifter comic.
And, well, I haven't read the... what was it, like Batman 28, where they flashed forward to something in Batman Eternal where I remember people saying she was someone called Bluebird. Did she have a mask on then?
Maybe. My recollection right now is completely shot on that one. I wonder if that's how that's going to tie in. Like, are they going to be like, and now go read Batman 28, and then next week is...
I opened a beer and it's fizzing. I don't want to get it on any comic books. I'm holding it over my garbage can.
That's why you got to open them outside.
Well, I liked this issue a lot. I found it very creepy. It kind of made my skin crawl at points, but, you know, in a good way, like a horror movie skin crawling.
Yeah, it was definitely horror. What I thought was funny is, like, they've been splitting up these runs, but the Harper Row and Robin thing gets a few pages here and there, and I feel like we got more shown while the mystical stuff's going on, so it's like the other, like, C plot going on now.
Yeah, I'm very curious, like, is it Scott Snyder telling the writers, well, in this issue, along with your story, we want you to hit these 2 points or something? Or
well, I imagine...
whether the writers just randomly choose which story threads to include.
Well, I imagine they have a TV show writing script thing going on, so for this chunk, this is the A story, and this gets so many pages. this is the B story, and this gets so many pages, and this is the C story, and this gets like a page.
Right.
And then they just keep rotating that through and play around with ad space and whatnot to make the comic work. And
so in this one, we get, for B stories, we get something with Lieutenant Bard shooting someone's hand and Batman showing up. That was the worst part of the issue. It didn't make much sense to me.
Well, I think they're trying to show more of
Bluebird and Red Robin.
Right. Well, I think the Bard being on edge and showing that he's not necessarily a dirty cop, but like an over-aggressive cop is
right.
what they're really selling there, which they don't need to do because they already more than did that.
Right. Well, and in last issue, the Bard action was clearly before Batman had discovered that Bard was over the edge.
Right.
It seemed like a flashback to an earlier part of the plot. And so now this Bard action where he's showing to be kind of a tough cop, I don't know if it's happening after he already did the whole thing where he set up Falcone or if it's happening before.
Well, and what kills me is, like, even though it was a tough cop last time and it was over Batman's line, like, it was to take down Falcone. Like, he was playing dirty because he had to do something to get it done, as it were. And the entire system was corrupt until he fixed that. Like, no good police work could be done, that sort of thing. Like, it's justified in a way. But by him going beyond now and doing all that, they're villainizing him, and it just kind of takes away the moral complexity of what came before. So...
Except that it's hard to tell, like, this scene shows him being a tough guy and shooting a guy in a hand, but it's still, that's kind of like what the Old West heroes did, where they couldn't kill people, so they would always be able to shoot people in the hand.
Well, it's not like Batman doesn't do worse to nearly everyone every night anyway.
Right. Shooting someone in the thumb isn't really that worse than breaking half the bones in their body.
And mentally scarring them for life.
So this and the interaction with Vic, we already knew that some romance was working with Vicky Vale, but this was very blunt. And so anyway, those 2 pages were the only part of the issue I wasn't in love with. But
I thought the Vicky Vale part was kind of interesting because it was definitely that, like, it's almost kind of a femme fatale sort of thing, like, oh, you're attracted to me, you're in my clutches now, but from like...
Got him where I want him, she said, thanks.
Yeah.
At least I think that's her thinking it.
Got him is her little thought caption.
Right, got him. So what confused me about that is because sometimes in these little captions at the end of a page, that caption at the end of a page is often the thought or someone saying something on the next page. But I guess that was not the case here.
Well, I think that's a double thing, because there's that, and then there's the Professor Pig thing, which is weird, because Professor Pig is written far differently here than he's being written elsewhere where I've read him.
That's true. He is more written like an insane person in a horror movie as opposed to an insane supervillain.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I thought that's how I took it when he was saying, "Sicky, sicky, sad, so sicky."
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, normally he'd like break down and start talking more like that, but like normally have like this weird philosophy that he'd be spewing and this or that, or I don't know. He was coherent until he wasn't.
Well, and I think a lot of what sells the horror of this is Dustin Nguyen's artwork, if that's how you say his name. I think he really made... I mean, it's a good story, but he made it really work well, I thought.
Well, and his storytelling panel to panel is there, and he keeps the mood right.
Right.
And yeah, as far as the art goes, I'm glad to be here, and I'm hoping we won't get that one artist from a few issues back that was just...
I'm really hoping to see that artist, but not on Batman.
No, I'm totally with you there. Like, it was cool art, just not for that.
Yeah, well, I hope since he's done the last 2 issues, I think there's another issue to go maybe in this little mini arc. So I hope he gets to do that too.
So now that we're here, I know you're a bit more sold on the supernatural element of this book.
than I was when it first was introduced. Yeah. How about you?
Much more so. That's the part I had to be won over on. But I was initially very intrigued by the Robin Harper Row like techno sci-fi side of it and
Hmm.
whatnot. And a lot of people, I think, including you, weren't as hot on that. I forget if you were interested in
No,
that.
I think I was starting to get pretty interested in that.
Okay.
It
Um,
seems an odd it seems an odd B plot for the supernatural issue, in fact.
well, it is kind of that balance, but I mean, it's kind of what do we have here? We have all the aspects of Batman. We have the sci-fi side, we have this like horror, like gothic mysticism side, and then we have the pure crime-fighting, super heroic side.
That's true. You're right. Very true. All sort of mixed together.
Yep. So that's roughly how I feel they're playing it, but we'll see. And it's all gonna have to blend together at some point.
Yeah, but I'm hoping there'll be like a 3 or 4 issue arc that really focuses on Red Robin and Bluebird or whatever she's gonna be called, Harper Row.
I'm hoping so, but I do kind of hope they come back to the Batman one and then go back to that. A little
True,
bit
we
later.
need some more Batman focus. The one that worries me the most now is the thread in Brazil with just sort of random bat people wandering around Brazil looking for some kind of clue of something. I don't know what.
Yeah, that's weird. I'm wondering if that's a callback to something in the Grant Morrison run, but there's not enough to go on. Although I could very well be, because that was roughly tied to the Spiral thing, which is part of the Grayson book, and the Grayson book's supposed to be tied into that. So yeah, there's a good chance.
Hmm.
Not that I read the Grayson book, just to be clear.
Ah, there was nothing about Rio, I don't think, in the. I have to reread that. Well, you were missing a good book.
I'll live.
I'll send you the digital codes 30 years from now.
Uh, um, oh. So
So should we move on to Robin Rises and Batman and Robin? And you also wanted to touch back on.
yeah, a little bit. Um, the main part I would like to actually start with kind of the transition between the two because I heard some talk about like people wondering if this book was justified, like because I heard a lot of people saying it was basically just one big fight.
That was me. I felt it was not justified
You
and
and
that it was.
Travis, I thought. No,
Did Travis say that too? Maybe I missed that.
maybe I don't know.
I listened to the roundtable, but I was doing dishes and things like that, so I might have missed what Travis said about it.
Oh, it's all good. Well, I feel like if I picked up Batman and Frankenstein 32 and then I started here, I'd be pretty lost. Because it seems like one big fight, but there's a little bit more that definitely goes on here. And it is a little bit harder to judge because there's definitely a huge chunk of the book that's an entire overrun of the history, which is nitpicky and weird when you consider the fact that a lot of it goes before the New 52.
Well, and it's quite possible someone, who's not at all into following comic book news would just be picking up Batman and Robin and not notice that this was part of the same story. And you would be a bit confused because you're in the same location, but Ra's al Ghul is gone, and in his place is this current version of the Justice League, which is a very odd version of the Justice League.
Yes, it is. Especially because I don't know how they're writing Shazam now. He seems particularly weird.
Yeah, Shazam really sort of stands out as a sore thumb in both those issues.
Yeah.
It almost makes me interested in the Justice League, though, because it sounds so screwed up.
I'll agree with you. I'm almost interested in the Justice League.
But I have a feeling it would be if Peter Tomasi was writing the Justice League, then I would like them.
If Peter Tomasi was writing it, I probably would be picking up, yeah. And also, if Justice League was $2.99, that would help.
Well, that would help, too.
That's
Well, I had my reaction was that this was just one big filler fight scene. Now, that could have been just the first 5 pages of this issue instead. Um, because if you take the plot of these two issues together, they're almost an issue's worth of plot, in my mind.
I thought there was a lot in this issue in particular. But
Well, there was a lot about Justice League, but at the end of this issue, I felt, in terms of the journey of the story, we're where we started 2 issues before.
well, okay, so Robin Omega, yeah, Robin Rise. I don't even know what the hell to call that issue.
Robin Rises Omega, which, yeah, it looks like Rises Robin Omega, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, you get that recap, which is interesting, and really interestingly to me is they glazed over one of the points that I found the most interesting about the inception of Damian, which is that Batman essentially gets raped to make Damian, and they kind of change that. Um,
well, so wait, in which version does he get raped?
in Batman and Son.
Okay.
If you read that, I mean, it's not explicit, obviously, but
Because I think going all the way back to the Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams version of Batman's meeting with Ra's al Ghul and then his daughter,
mhm.
they clearly make love.
Well, I see. My
And
idea was that it was a separate time.
my idea is that they retconned what went on then, and that's when she got his sperm.
Okay.
Because obviously the lives of superheroes are like accordions. It stretches out for a certain amount of time, then you squish everything back together to have happened in a reasonable amount of time.
Well, plus you're talking about continuity and what's post-crisis and this and that. And,
Right. So to many of us, these very famous early Neil Adams stories about Ra's al Ghul, this seemed to go back to that version to me.
some of it does, and some of it definitely doesn't.
And I don't know what the Grant Morrison version is, but this image of Batman without his shirt on, I remember that very vividly from the Neil Adams version.
That is definitely from the Neil Adams version. What happens but I mean, everything else is obviously a huge part of the Grant Morrison run, and that's
right.
It's on the Grant Morrison. So I'm like, are they technically changing that, or are they glossing it over? I don't know. I just thought it was interesting.
Seeing how Peter Tomasi sees things. The parts that he takes from the different Batman histories, because it's the New 52, he probably feels free to take what he likes of the continuity.
I'm fine with that because it's a better story. So. So I mean, there's the recap, which is done by a different artist. It looks like, or maybe it's just different color.
I think what they did, my guess is from looking at it, is they took it directly from pencils and didn't have an inker.
Oh.
And that's why it looks different. It has a fuzzier look. And then when you get to the present on this big double page, all the lines have a dark black look to them rather than a pencil-y look to them.
Good eye. No, that's cool. So anyways, I mean, there is this fight, but right before the fight, you get this whole thing about the Darkseid army versus this cobbled together force, and there's this whole bit with Batman and Ra's looking at each other like, we're enemies, but we're gonna fight you, and then we're gonna fight each other. Like, it's just the same. It was funny to me because they play them like they're arch villains, but we know Ra's isn't Batman's arch nemesis.
Right.
Or Batman has multiple arch nemesis. Depending how you look at it.
Well, I think for a while, Ra's al Ghul, in my memory of my early Batman reading, Joker was pretty much pushed aside because they were embarrassed by the Adam West version. And
that seems to reason.
Ra's al Ghul was raised up as his most important villain. And then he slowly brought the Joker back. Maybe Alan Moore is the one who really brought him back as a serious threat.
Yeah. But Ra's was made by Neil Adams and Danny O'Neil, right?
Right. So I think that was when their their marching orders from DC is make Batman not like Batman 66, not like the TV show, because they sold a lot of copies while the TV show was popular, but as soon as the TV show became unpopular, they almost had to cancel Batman. It was doing so badly.
Okay.
Because it was sort of a reverse effect. Oh, we love Batman, now we're sick of Batman, and then no one wanted to buy Batman because they equated it with something they were sick of.
So then, in the middle of this giant fight, though, there's this bit about Batman remembering Damian saving all of them in this, like, alternate universe.
Okay, and that's from stuff I hadn't read, which I guess
I hadn't read it either, but I mean, you get the impact of it, and I mean, I feel like that's really important, and that's a big churning point, because that seems to be, because from here on out, Batman's back to, I'm bringing Damian alive, like, after all that about him being crazy and wanting to do that, and them talking him down for, you know, the last year of comics. And in a flash...
I found that reversal hard to swallow.
That's fair. I'm just saying, like, that's there.
Since I didn't understand what was going on there, I kind of glossed over it.
Yeah.
But so you're bringing up very good points about remembering Damian saving all of them, and what kind of impact that kind of has in the middle of this big fight with the Justice League involved. And
right, and then the Justice League comes in, and then he's fighting them, and then just as soon as the Justice League save the day from them, Batman's turning around and punching the Justice League.
Right.
And that says a lot. Although it's not necessarily so surprising when that Shazam shows up and Lex Luthor and Captain Cold are like the other half. The Justice
For some reason, I really didn't like him watching him punch Captain Marvel and Lex Luthor.
Oh, if he punched Lex Luthor, I would have thrown this down best comic of the year, but...
But, I don't know, it just seemed... It seemed Batman is whiny baby a little bit.
He's definitely losing it, and that's a big part of this, is he's gone. He's emotionally vulnerable, and he's a little past crazy, and this is kind of like that Batman Too Far thing, where a lot of cracks start to show. But I also do feel like it started to be written a lot better in this, and this plays on that theme very well. This issue is huge, though.
Well, I think the art has a lot to do with it. I know people love Andy Kubert's art, and I can see why they do. But for me, he's not a very interesting storyteller, and the emotion and the impact in this issue is so much more to me.
I like Gleason's art, but something about his faces has always left some want for me.
There's something over the top about it. Something a little crazy about his art.
Well, I think all the faces feel a bit flat. Like, Wonder Woman doesn't look that different from, say, Lex Luthor. And that's a little...
That's kind of funny to think. Well, you know what bothered me in this? I mean, it's totally unfair of me in terms of, you know, plot-wise, we have to have the whole Justice League against Batman, right? But I felt like different characters within the Justice League should react differently to Batman's desire to go save his son. And I thought particularly this is the kind of thing Wonder Woman, as we know her in the Wonder Woman comic, would do.
Well, and that's part of what I found interesting, because I feel like Wonder Woman here was like understanding, but saying like, we need to approach this correctly. We need to do this, and because it's such a big threat, we need to go in correctly, and we can't just go in half-cocked.
But I guess I would like to see Wonder Woman help him out or something. Like, in her own last 33 issues, she's constantly trying to save this baby. And
she
the mother of the baby, even though everyone thinks they're going to bring about the end of the world and that kind of stuff.
Well, but she also isn't running into anything half-cocked. Like, she knows what she's doing the entire time. I mean, and she's a goddess and all that, yada yada. But I
Right.
mean, she has a plan through and through, and she's thoughtful and moves. I mean, obviously she's thrown into some situations, but that's different. Here, I think she's trying to get Batman to calm down to say like, we can go together, but we need to go together. And that's the thing is like Batman's like, I'm doing this. And she's like, we need to be a team. That's a huge part of why they're showing the like Justice League crafting that suit that he's trying to get.
Does she say that?
Well, all of us contributing to a singular purpose, you know all too well. Like, she's saying we need to go together. The other thing, too, is, like, the important members of the Justice League basically aren't there except for her. I mean, Superman doesn't show up till later. Aquaman's there, but whatever.
Well, aren't kind of Lex Luthor, isn't Lex Luthor the leader now? And isn't
Well, I'm talking about, like, Superman, Green Lantern, and Flash. You know, like, that's part of the team you need to go with you. And I mean, Aquaman and Batman definitely have that little thing where he's like, "What if What if it was Mara? That's not fair."
Mhm.
Exactly. You know, that's. I thought that was a good little.
That
moment.
was a very good thing, and that's kind of what triggered me to think more about how Wonder Woman also should be.
And it's probably hard to judge on how to write Wonder Woman right now because I mean, this one thing's ending, and then there's like the other version, the more Justice League Wonder Woman, and how do you?
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I mean, and plot-wise, they obviously have a setup where everyone needs to be against Batman. You know, it doesn't work otherwise. There's no point in this issue unless everyone's against him.
Well, and what did you think about that bit where Bruce was saying to Superman, like, if you wouldn't mind landing, my neck hurts? I thought that was...
That was an interesting little detail, but I don't...
Well, I'm just never used to, like, Batman showing any sign of, like, weakness whatsoever, and that was...
That's true, that was kind of... Although maybe it was a dig at, you know, you come down to my level. Don't play God around me anymore or something.
Well, but that sounds more Batman than what he actually said. Well, the big thing, too, here is that they're really trying to set up that he is the human among all these gods. Like, he is the more... Which is weird, because Lex Luthor's sitting right there.
Right. I would think Lex Luthor would want to be wearing that suit, actually, now that I think about it.
Maybe, although he may like his suit more for whatever reason.
And I don't know anything about the current Justice League. I don't know if that suit is something they ever mentioned before, or they just made up for this issue.
Yeah, no, I have no idea. But yeah, they're setting up a big thing about him being mortal. And what's weird, too, is because given the previous chunk of now I'm wondering if that was in the recap. Because Darkseid's the one who killed him, and now that's the person who's going to go tackle to go get Damian back. Which would really bookend a lot of stuff. Yeah, I died, and it's the Omega Beam thing. Huh.
Sorry, I muted my mic for a second. Can you hear me now, or did I?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I was just fiddling around to see if we had any viewers, but I don't think we do.
Okay. They'll watch us later.
Every minute of it. And not while they're washing dishes. Well, my overall... See, here's the thing. Ever since I heard that Batman's going to Apocalypse and trying to get Robin back, I want to get to that story. Like, I'm excited by the idea of that story, and both of these issues felt like postponing that story happening. So maybe that's my central... There may be good issues... I mean, you've pointed out some things that make me appreciate Robin Rising a little better. And there was lots of good stuff in this issue. But all of it my perspective on it was all this is just putting off the story that I'm really here to see.
Well, I feel like what they're setting up here a lot is like, why isn't Batman going in with the Justice League? Now we know why. Wouldn't Batman have a prepared sort of thing for this instead of just going in more or less naked comparatively? Now we have a reason why. And then I found the last 2 pages kind of interesting, kind of like we're going to get right to what you want next. I mean, we have him assembling his little group. Not everyone, though.
No.
You'll notice Grayson's absent.
Right. He's still pretending Grayson's dead, I guess.
Because, that's more important right now.
Wait a minute. Who's the guy with the mustache? That's
Alfred?
Not Alfred, right?
Yeah, that's Alfred.
Oh, he suddenly looks much younger.
Yeah. He's like Aunt May. His age is very variable.
Even younger than when drawn by this same artist a few issues ago.
Well, you'll notice Ace is there.
Yeah, I love Ace, actually. I just want Batman and Ace to go to Apocalypse.
Well, where's Matches Malone? That's who he really needs.
Right. Well, my whole thought of the way to rescue someone from Apocalypse is not to go in as a giant superpowered being, but kind of sneak in and just seem to be one of the slaves on Apocalypse. But I don't know. I have no idea what their take on it will be. I love the drawing of Calabac too.
I love this last page, spoilers, but that cleft chin, man.
I wish I'd shaved my beard. I got a cleft chin under there.
Oh, okay.
Does Bruce Wayne always have a cleft chin, or does it just depend on the artist?
No, that's a good question. And it's not covered up by the mask. That's a very distinguishing feature.
I don't think the Andy Kubert version has a cleft chin. I can't see now.
Huh.
It's hard to tell. I don't think he does, but there's no massive close-up of him. The only massive close-up has his finger or his hand blocking the chin, so I'm not sure.
They knew we'd be looking.
Well, Gleason is a weird guy on faces because sometimes he makes Batman look very old and worn, and then other times he's kind of fast and loose with faces in general. But I still love his artwork.
And yeah, I don't know, do you have anything else on Batman and Robin?
Is Batman that much shorter than Aquaman? That's my last thought.
Aquaman is a king.
Kings are tall. Yeah, if I discount the fact that I'm in a rush to get to the main story, it was a good issue.
Well, speaking of being in a rush to get to the next issue, 0 Year's finally over.
So is that the actual last issue, or is there one more?
I was convinced this is the last issue, but that might just be my hopes and prayers.
No, you're probably right. I'm just not sure because I'm not reading it.
Well, 0 Year finale. Yeah, I'm hoping this is. And I have to say, this has been my favorite issue from the last many of them. It's definitely a Riddler story, which is really what I wanted all along. And
it seems like a lot of people have been saying this last arc was better than the other 2 arcs of 0 Year. Did you find that?
Well, yeah, because it's all the new stuff. Because the first 2 were more or less like, let's retell the origin of Batman, and nobody wants that. And frankly, I mean, some of the stuff they're touching on is playing on like Batman Year One, and you can't try to overwrite Batman Year One. Right. I don't care if it's the New 52 or anything. That's one of the most iconic comics ever done. It is like, if anything is Batman canon, that is Batman canon. And I don't know, it just seems stupid to try to play on that or build on that really anymore.
Well, and I always assumed they called it Batman Year Zero so that they could sell it as a companion volume. They could sell Batman Zero, Batman One, and Batman Two forever at Barnes and Noble or on Amazon or wherever.
Well, they don't sell year 2, and they don't sell year 3.
Is there a year 3? I didn't know that.
There's a year 3. I haven't read it yet, but I want to. Yeah, but I think year 0 would have sold better probably if it was shorter. Because, well, and the whole idea of the 0-year thing, you'll find is sort of a conceit that plays to something else, which is mostly in this last bit. That's all really about the Riddler, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that just was there, and it was kind of interesting, but it could have been so much shorter. If this was cut down, it would have been better. I don't know. But this issue was fine, and this issue is all the crazy Riddler stuff that, like I said, I was looking for, and they play a cool thing with the motivation of Bruce being Batman here that I don't think has really been done that way before. So I think this last issue sells a lot of what they were trying to do. But at the same time, it's one oversized issue among too much of the rest.
Well, do you think if you read it all at once and you got to that good ending, then it would all seem more worthwhile than reading it monthly the way you have?
Yes. Well, because, I mean, suddenly you're reading a story, but you end on a high note. And a lot of the other stuff it's not that it's so bad, it's that it was so mediocre for this thing that's supposed to be so big and hold so much promise and have all these ties and ultimately won't. And it takes a year to get through. If you read in an afternoon, you're not going to have all that build-up and time and compression and deal with all that. And I'll be looking forward to actually sitting down and reading it as it's meant to be ingested, but
right. And has it actually taken like 14 months to do the whole thing, or
yeah, there's a
breaks in the middle?
Because there's definitely a couple months where they took a break,
right?
And
like certainly the one where they flashed forward to Batman Eternal was a break, and I feel like there was another one, but maybe I'm...
Yeah, there was another one. And then what was really annoying too is I forget how many there were, but there were a ton of like $5 issues in here.
Right.
So on top of it being a year's worth of comics, they had to fit more pages in, and I mean, even when it's all collected, I can guarantee you there are definitely pages that if they were cut would make the story stronger because it would be more concise and
right.
So.
Well, I think if you read it all together in a collection, you can kind of breeze over the slower moments or the mediocre moments and not focus on them because you're not looking at just an issue there.
And they might feel more earned because like there'd be all this crazy action, all this crazy stuff, and all this homage, and then all of a sudden there's a little like breather, and it might feel a little bit more. Yeah. Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see because I'll probably read it in trade. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just kind of decided a while back that Snyder writes for trades and does not write for single issues at all. And it topped it for me when I heard him say that before they put out the trade, he rewrites little bits that he wants to adjust further for the novelistic effect.
Well, that sucks.
Apparently he did that in the trade of Death of the Family. And
I heard there are
minor adjustments, but things that will change the meaning of things a little bit here and there.
Oh, that sucks. And that's my favorite one of his.
It's the shortest one of his.
Is it?
Like the Owls thing was two hardback volumes,
Oh, I consider the Owls kind of broken up into two different things, but yeah, I guess you're right.
I read it as all one story, really, that they just broke up into two.
Well, that's fair. They were back to back too. And well, I mean, there's like the black.
I haven't read that yet. I need to read that. It sounds like that's the one that everyone harkens back to.
It's fun. I don't know. If you're looking for older Batman stuff, there might be some better things to.
Seems like he always wants whatever he does to be so important and I feel like that maybe drags it down after a point. That's because even with Death of the Family, which I was loving until the last issue, the need to make it also important, but then at the same time not being willing to shake things up too much either.
Well, he wants to play to the mythos, well, a certain version of the mythos, but he also wants to build it. Like, he wants everything to be important, but his main beeline to making it important is about rooting it in Gotham and making Gotham more important, which is interesting. I think it's a good tact, and he's done a lot for that. I mean, more than anything else, I think his Gates of Gotham, like one-shot Batman graphic novel, did a really good job of that.
I don't even know of that one. So he's done something else before, or along with that Black Mask one.
Yeah, I think it was released before he was on proper Batman, but it goes back to like kind of the prehistory of Gotham, plays with like the Cobblepot family and the Wayne family and kind of the roots that Gotham's built on. And that's a lot of what like the Owls thing is about,
Right.
is like this hidden thing that's inherent in Gotham and whatnot. And Joker one, I guess, isn't as much. But I mean, the 0 Year thing does a lot with like building another history into Gotham, although it's kind of the new 52 No Man's Land in a way, I'd argue. So,
well, I think Gotham is a great character. I mean, to use Gotham as a character is a great idea.
no, it's a great idea. What I find somewhat frustrating about it is in DC, people talk about building up Gotham, building up Gotham, building up Gotham. I'm like, yes, but you've already done that. You know where else you could build up? Anywhere. Like, there's not much, like, comparatively, there's nothing for Metropolis even, much less, like, Keystone or anywhere else. Do they even use Keystone anymore, now that I think about it?
Is that part of the Flash?
Yeah, I thought that was Flash, and then there was, or is that Coast? There's Keystone and Coast.
Coast, I think, was Green Lantern originally, maybe?
Yeah, and I don't know if he's there at all.
Yeah, I think he's just been out in outer space for so long that they've given up on.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is back when Nightwing was more of a character, like Bloodhaven, by being kind of like the lighter shadow of Gotham, even though Metropolis and Gotham are supposed to be the polar opposites, Bloodhaven had more to it just by the virtue of being kind of like a sister city to Gotham. And so...
Well, you know what? I'm going to get too sleepy soon, so maybe we should move on to talking about your explorations of Grant Morrison's Batman.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Does he care about Gotham?
Not as much. What's interesting, too, is that this Batman and Robin run is obviously like directly tied to the Grant Morrison bit. But the more I've been reading the Grant Morrison run, the more I understand that like the Grant Morrison run is probably the biggest like tie and callback for everything modern Batman. I mean, Batwing comes out of it. Damian comes out of it. A lot of the understanding of how characters... I mean, Batwoman didn't come out of it, but is tied to it inherently as well. And so... There's just a lot of interesting things. It's also interesting because it's spotted across a few different parts of the Batman history. Because, I mean, it goes way pre-New 52. I mean, it starts way before Final Crisis, where a lot of other stuff was going on. And then, I mean, not that far post-Hush. And then you get all the way... I mean, Final Crisis is a huge part of it. And then you flop over... and then it's just on the other side, and it has to adhere to all these new rules, and more or less doesn't, actually.
Right. Well, and, I mean, the way he talks, he's mostly interested in the ever-evolving mythos of Batman himself. You know, wanting to absorb all of the history of Batman.
There is one issue
successfully with Superman in All-Star Superman, I guess, and wanted to do it with Batman next.
Well, but there's some things he did with Batman that were more interesting as far as doing that. There's one issue in particular where he talks about like dealing with the Joker like early on, and it's this hardened criminal, and then Robin comes in and everything gets lighter, and he's like everything's for him, and he's like, remember just last year the Joker was this hardened criminal trying to kill people, and now he's just trying to steal these bizarre artifacts, and it's like. He's like, this isn't what I trained for. I didn't train to deal with like clowns and quiz masters and all that. I trained to deal with criminals and.
That's very funny, actually. Sorry, keep talking. I'm just.
Yeah.
It was getting very hot in my room, and I wanted to open the window.
Yeah.
But I was fanning myself.
But in order for me to appreciate the Grant Morrison stuff, I had to read some stuff and understand that Grant Morrison has these like rules about Batman and how he operates and what those stories are. So like if Batman is in costume and is Batman, he's invincible. And he can't be beaten. That's interesting because he plays to like this preparation thing. Batman's prepared for everything, but if you throw him into something weird, which becomes part of the Zen and Ra thing he did, then that gets tilted on its head. And so that's supposed to be a lot more tense than it actually is, because at that point he's not actually Batman. So technically, like, he could be killed, and that plays in the whole Batman R.I.P. thing. But if you don't like understand these metatextual like rules that he set up for himself, it doesn't work as well.
How do you even discover the metatextual rules he set up? Just by reading a lot, or does he set it up in some spot somewhere?
No, I had to Google it, actually. Which, yeah, it's insane. Like, so that's not good writing, but by knowing that, it does make it more interesting. And so really, in a lot of ways, he's playing with the idea of Batman as, like, its own genre, because there's all these tropes and expectations for what a Batman story is. And so he's playing with that and trying to subvert it. And that makes it bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I need to, now having this knowledge from you, and then start from the very beginning of Grant Morrison. While he started up with Batman was a period where I was just randomly walking into comic book stores. I would pick up an issue or two here or there and just not get it at all, really, until Batman and Robin, I guess.
Well, and Batman and Robin's such a different animal compared to the rest of it when you're talking about the Dick Grayson Damian bit.
Right.
And yeah, and that's just some of the craziest criminals and them fighting all that, and they barely deal with any like normal Batman shenanigans.
Right. Yeah, it seemed very based on the criminals, from what I remember reading of that. Like Grant Morrison just pulling the weirdness out of his hat.
Oh yeah, and the way they pull in Professor Pig, which is like creepy and weird, and it's not like them fighting like Two-Face or anything. And that's part of what makes the Tomasi run so much more interesting, is by the time you get there, it's like those two, but like classically the way you'd expect, but with all this new background.
Right. Well, and I don't, from what I did read of, I guess because I didn't read much of Batman, Bruce Wayne Batman with Robin. I mostly read Dick Grayson with Robin. Mm-hmm. I just perceived Robin as a dick. Damian Robin as a-hole.
Robin was a dick.
Right. And then when I got to Tomasi, and suddenly we got what felt like a kind of moving father-son attempt at a father-son relationship, which I guess is cheap sentimentality when I say it like that, but it just seemed very effective.
It's totally there, and I think a lot of people resonate with that a lot better than I do. I mean, I definitely see it and respect it, but to me, Damian's still like one of the least interesting Robins, no matter how you slice it.
See, he's the most interesting to me because he says the most about Batman to me.
Because he's his son, or because he puts up the most
Because
opposition?
Batman is trying to be a father, right? But Batman is not well equipped to be a father at first. And one of the things that I think fatherhood, when you experience fatherhood, is that your children force you to become a parent, right? They force you to help them or be there for them or whatever, or for most people.
Gotcha.
And I felt like we were seeing some of that before Robin got killed, before Damian got killed. We were seeing Batman evolve and be forced to be a father and learn how to be a father. And that played nicely against his general persona. And I guess, in a reality, if he were taking on these other teenagers, he would have been in that same position, of forced to be a father. But it just somehow Tomasi got it really going well in his run of Batman and Robin before Robin died.
Well, and I mean, it does definitely feel different. And I guess I'm still a little not past the fact that he pushed out Tim Drake, more or less.
Uh-huh.
And it's interesting because when Damian initially comes in, the transfer starts to happen. Tim's talking to Bruce, and he's like, "I'm your partner. I've been your partner for the longest," because apparently that's how it was in continuity at that point. And now that we're on the other side of the New 52, they were like never partners.
Right. So it's not it's the creators pushing him out.
Well, yeah.
It's not Batman rejecting him in the current continuity.
I don't know if they've actually touched on that directly yet. Like how Red Robin came to be in this new
incarnation. How does he exist? Well, Red Robin's mostly existed in the Teen Titans, which I've never read. I mean, in the New 52.
Right.
So I have no idea if they've addressed where Red Robin comes from and how come he has some kind of connection to Batman, even though he was never one of Batman's Robins.
Right. And so it's just bizarre there, too. But it's weird to me because, I mean, the whole point of Tim Drake was that among everything else, like, he pushed more the detective angle, and he was, despite the fact that Dick was who he was and whatever, like, in a few years, Dick was supposed to be the most likely to be the next Batman because he was the best detective. And then that never came to fruition because Dick became Batman. I don't know. I just prefer a lot of the aughts and 90s Batman where there's like this whole mythos and this whole family and there's all this stuff going on. That's part of when Gotham actually felt more alive to me because there's all these characters and by all that going on. Felt like the city is so much more vibrant when some character would be here and then they'd be here, and just because of the location, things got tied together, not so much because it was all tied to Batman.
Right. Well, a lot was lost with the New 52, I guess, and they tried to somehow keep it all, or keep a lot of it with Batman. But they really should have just accepted their premise that we were starting over again and literally started over with Batman. So they've ended up with a little bit of the old, but not the good part of the old, really, I think.
Some of it's good, some of it's not as good. It's also kind of hard to reconcile because it's not even necessarily like the years that went by and, how long was each Robin or whatever, and how does that work, whatever. But I mean, literally the story of like, yeah, what is behind Red Robin? How does that reconcile with there being Damian now? And then he is a huge part of what made Damian Batman's relationship rocky at first, or Dick and Damian's relationship rocky at first, is because he was basically replacing Tim, and then how Tim reacts to that is part of what makes him Red Robin, and him searching for Bruce. And if that's all gone, like, that's fine, but we need some rationale to replace it. And we're, 4 years into the New 52, right. And I don't think we've gotten it.
Yeah. And I'm worried they're heading towards some major universe rebooting anyway, and all of these questions we're asking now will again be moot.
You think they're going for another reboot already?
I don't know, but the way when I read Future's End, it feels like they're heading towards something rebooty.
I don't know. That's one book, and yeah, it's a weekly, but I don't know if they do a reboot off that. I mean, I'm sure they'll do. I'm sure there will be some manner of inclusion or something where like the future DC gets more properly integrated to the new stuff. But I mean, there's always going to be some separation. Maybe they're just trying to integrate, because a huge part of that book is a lot of the characters that DC was trying to sell initially are in it that didn't take on so well. I mean, you have Frankenstein.
Right. You have all the rejects. They just reintroduced, what's her name, starting with a V.
Oh, Voodoo?
Voodoo, an issue or two ago. It's all, but the whole idea that somewhere between the now and 5 years in the future, there's a major war with Earth 2. And now all the Earth 2 heroes are on Earth Prime, I guess, because it's not Earth 1.
I thought that was supposed to be the third weekly.
So the third weekly is going to be this war that's already happened in the continuity of Future's End, I guess.
Well, but I'm sure Future's End will inevitably reboot it, because inevitably they have to do some sort of reset of time, because that's the entire premise, because otherwise then, what is it, Brother Eye takes over?
Well, but Brother Eye is a separate issue from the end of Earth 2, though.
Right.
They have to stop Brother Eye, or there is no 50 years in the future doesn't exist. And then how can you have the Legion of Superheroes? Or Justice League 3000.
Well, do they have a Legion right now? I forget.
They exist somewhere.
Yeah, there was that Legion Lost book, so they're supposed to...
Well, they had two. The New 52 had two Legion books. They had the regular Legion and Legion Lost.
And nobody cared.
And now they have Justice League 3000, which I like a lot, but that's around the same time the Legion should be happening, I think.
Huh.
Anyway, that's not so important, but I do, reading the tea leaves when I read Future's End, I feel like they're trying to build everything towards some kind of reset.
Was it a reset, or is it like a crisis? Well, I guess crisis is usually where some form of reset.
Crisis was kind of a reset, right? So they may not do it the same way as New 52, but I hope I'm wrong. And I worry that the reason why Robin Rises is looking really stretched out is they're stretching it out so that something with Batman and Robin in Apocalypse is going to tie in, because Apocalypse is... I'm going to give my spoilery guesses. Apocalypse is going to win in Earth 2 and then use Earth 2 to invade our Earth Prime, or if that's what they call it. And so if Batman's going to Apocalypse, and Apocalypse is heavily involved with Earth 2, which will then... It just all looks like it's coming together there. I don't know.
Well, if they're going to go that route, I wonder if they're going to do a soft universe shake sort of thing, a la Infinite Crisis, to kind of excuse some continuity slips so that they can bring in some of the old continuity to tell some stories that people are more wanting to see.
Yeah. You're reading Future's End too, right?
I'm buying it. I need to catch up on it. I'm several weeks behind, because I've been reading all that Batman.
One thing, right, and I'm getting you off the subject of Batman, I'm sorry. One thing that interests me in New 52 is the Superman with the mask.
Yeah, no, that's nuts.
And I'm wondering if he's Superman from Earth 2, which could either be the Superman who has joined Apocalypse, at least temporarily, or the Black Superman on Earth 2, who's from the House of Zod, which is interesting. No one's really done anything with that yet.
Huh.
So anyway, that Superman with the mask intrigues me. I just think he's not Clark Kent Superman.
Yeah, I'm hoping not.
Prime, not Clark Kent Superman.
I'm really hoping not. Yeah.
So maybe we should get back to Grant Morrison. I know he's been filling your head.
I don't know if I have tons
So have
more.
you now read everything Grant Morrison has written on Batman from the old 52 and the new 52?
I have a few last issues of Batman Incorporated to read up on.
From the new 52.
Yeah, so I'm on the last leg. I would have finished it actually, but I started looking through and I found all these missing issues. Like there was a missing chapter from R.I.P. and then there was a couple issues I somehow missed that were directly after R.I.P. That was this memorial thing that had that crazy Joker bit I told you about.
So I read so little of the RRP. Does it? I think maybe one issue, maybe where he was in cave Batman time or something.
Oh, you're talking about Bruce Wayne through the ages or whatever that is?
Anyway, does all the death of Batman and R.I.P. and Bruce Wayne through the ages, does that all now seem of value to you?
No. A lot of it seems so kind of skippable in a lot of ways, especially that Batman Through Time. I thought that was going to have a little more to it, and it might... Like, that's part of where I thought those Bat people were that we were talking about with Batman Eternal. But it was just kind of this weird story, and there's a lot of weird little hanging parts that don't really play into anything else. And there's a weird story where it runs into Jonah Hex, and that one was particularly bizarre. But a lot of that seems kind of weird, and R.I.P. is like the most bizarre of what Grant Morrison wrote. Like, I think there was something going on like at that time, because that's right when he wrote the last issue of Final Crisis, and he was doing this thing with Batman. I think he had some idea about some metatextual, because I remember reading something that he wrote about that, about how comics with these heroes that are so like hinged and death is not a thing anymore, like you have to write them metatextually, and this is how comics are going to be written in the future. And I'm pretty sure he's wrong, because I don't think anybody got the final issue of Final Crisis. I found it really fascinating, but you'd have to look at it from like a literary, like postmodernist perspective in order to find anything in it. Which is not what your average comic buyer is looking for. But a lot of the like Batman Robin stuff I definitely think is interesting and worthwhile. The Batman and Son arc, which now they only sell the trade that has the Black Glove, which, yeah. But that initial part is really good and really interesting. So
would those two be the best parts of the Batman run then? I mean, the Morrison run? Overall?
Well, it's so split up, because, I mean, there's, like, yeah, there's that part, and then there's the Return of Ra's, which is... So, yeah, I mean, I guess the Sun... I like the Batman Robin stuff, but I also like the Batman Incorporated stuff for the most part. Mostly because of the crazy world building. Like, there's the African Batman, and the Spanish guy, that never becomes really a Batman, but he becomes part of the characters, and just all these different characters across the world and playing on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that idea that there's a network, but then it inevitably crashes down. And it never went as big as I thought they were going to do it. They play mostly with the extended Bat family.
Right.
It seemed kind of cheap to make Batgirl or whatever part of Batman Incorporated.
Well, and then Batman Incorporated in the New 52 just felt like Grant Morrison's version of Batman and Robin with a little bit of Batman Incorporated mixed in.
But it's technically part of continuity. I mean, they even mentioned Batman Eternal.
They mentioned Batman Eternal before it happened in there?
No. They mentioned Batman Incorporated and the fall of it in Batman Eternal.
Right. Batman Eternal to me feels like Batman Incorporated. Because we're going around the world, and that we got the Tokyo Batman, and that's Argentinian Batman and Batwing.
Yeah, they're playing on all that, and all that's from that run. So So that part might be particularly of interest because it sets up all that. Um, it feels like this last leg that I have to read, though, the last few issues of Batman Incorporated have nothing to do with Batman Incorporated, and all are about Damian and Talia and Batman and this like bizarre fight going on with all that.
Right. So, well, based on total ignorance, because I haven't read enough of Grant Morrison's Batman run, I almost feel like Scott Snyder is the anti-Morrison. He's taking all of what's been done and bringing it back down to a more, a more on the ground. Everything fits together in a kind of less airy-fairy postmodern way, and a more traditional, a very modern but more traditional story, and takes the air out of the Morrison stuff, even as they use a lot of it in Batman Eternal.
You're not wrong. Is the best way I want to put that. I think the hard part is that like anyone else writing Batman that isn't Morrison is more like that than Morrison. Like that's part of what makes the Morrison run.
I'm assigning too much significance to Snyder because anyone who would do it would be bringing him back down to earth, so to speak.
Comparatively, yeah, because you have to remember Morrison was the one who wrote that Justice League thing where like Batman was the most powerful character the entire time. And although he didn't write that one with where Wade wrote that was all about Batman taking down the entire Justice League, but
right.
It was all there, that whole Prometheus thing and him punching him out because he swapped the disc for all the superpowers for Stephen Hawking and all the crazy moves. I don't know. And introducing the thing to Batman, the two little H's that I don't know if anyone else uses.
Huh. I'm not sure what you mean by the two little H's.
Oh, I guess not then. In a lot of Morrison's Batman, like if there would be like some sort of quiet moment or a pause or something, Batman will just make this weird little noise, like a.
Huh.
It's like two H's with like some punctuation next to it. And I heard him talk about it once. He's like, I always figured Batman would be so ignorant and stuff that he'd be kind of like making some sly noises, like he's thinking of something you're not. Occasionally. Or like, why would it take you so long to get that? Like he writes Batman pretty pompous, which makes a good sense.
Was Batman always this genius who's smarter than everyone else, or is that kind of a modern development of Batman, I wonder?
I'm wondering if a lot of that is because of Batman being in the Justice League. Because how do you justify Batman being in the Justice League?
Right. So the more modern writers like Morrison and Wade had to figure out how he could be in the Justice League.
Well, and that's
the
interesting.
Older writers didn't worry about it. The point of the Justice League was just to have a lot of heroes in one book.
Well, and that initial modern take on the Justice League was started by Morrison, so how do you divorce that?
Right. So maybe Morrison has kind of invented, even though he loves to touch back to old Batmans, he's invented this new Batman who, thinks, like a chess master 50 moves ahead and has everyone else outthought years ahead of time.
Yeah, I feel it's kind of morphed, though, because, I mean, definitely, even back when, people kind of played a comparison between Sherlock Holmes and Batman.
Right. But Sherlock Holmes was obviously a genius and everything, but he was more, it was his observational powers. I don't know if he had everything, this sort of super chess genius kind of thinking.
Yeah, that's true. Well,
I just don't remember. I don't remember thinking of Batman the way, now that we've been talking about it, that this way before. In my earlier days of reading comic books in the 70s and 80s, I don't remember thinking of him as having these kind of plans. Some of it may go back to Frank Miller, because that's my first memory of Batman it being clear that Batman had figured out how to take down Superman should he need to.
There's that. I'm wondering if more of this preparedness on kind of the level we're talking about, not so much the Superman thing, because that's its own can of worms. But like the Legends of the Dark Knight stuff that you're having me read, like there's a lot of talk about preparedness, and Morrison touches on it later, but it comes from earlier stuff, like especially the Venom one, where he actually did train and prepare his body for all these various toxins and whatnot people might throw at him.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And a lot of the Hugo Strange stories are about like the perfection of a human being and how Batman is like the pinnacle. And
yeah, so maybe they just built up something that was already there, but I used to think of him more as, yes, he made himself the perfect detective, and he made himself the perfect sort of gymnastic fighter, but I didn't used to think of him as the kind of genius that can think that far ahead. But it might have all been there, and it just wasn't so emphasized.
well, there's a difference between being like wicked smart and finding situations like preparing to a certain extent and whatnot. But I mean, Grant Morrison took it to an extent where Batman has literally prepared for any eventuality. Any eventuality.
Right.
And it's like it becomes essentially superpowers. It's totally on the superhuman level, whereas the older stuff, especially the Batman Year One stuff, try to keep a certain level of realism to it. Like, he's prepared for things and he's trained for things, but you could still totally take him by surprise by throwing a curve out of nowhere, which is ultimately the idea behind why the Joker's so deadly to him, because he can't predict crazy. And that's interesting because Grant Morrison addresses his level of Batman to that Joker, and you kind of see it in reverse when Grant Morrison's dealing with it.
Well, that brings me back to Robin Rises and Batman and Robin, because part of me subconsciously was thinking that Batman already has a plan that he made years ago about how he would do a one-man invasion of Apocalypse should he need to. And now he can just adopt it as a rescue plan for Robin's corpse. But
well, I don't think it's a one-man
I was kind of expecting that rather than this, I'm going off the rails and I'm going to try to outsmart. Like, he didn't have a good enough plan for outsmarting the Justice League and getting the suit that he wanted and everything. He wasn't subtle enough, which was convenient for the way Tomasi is plotting this. But I think part of me is Tomasi is maybe not doing a Batman that's as smart as the Grant Morrison Batman.
And I am so fine with that, because it puts Batman to being like a superhero and powerful, but not like the Impossible Man.
Right.
I like Batman with some flaws, because otherwise it's not really a story.
Well, and this has been all about his flaws, really.
No.
At least since Robin died, but maybe even before, because he was kind of this flawed father of Robin with Tomasi's run.
I think that's why I thought this issue is so groundbreaking and stuff, because on top of showing like all of Batman's flaws coming out at once, except for one, which is how he pushes people away, and his family was there for him like right away, even though they technically should still be coming off the death of a family. That's still technically...
The whole death of a family never played very well afterwards. I mean, they never really made it seem like there's some serious alienation, more than the alienation that was always there, I think.
Well, I think it's written pretty well in Batgirl, but I think this Batman and Robin arc is doing a really good job of showing this Batman who might be striking out further from the Justice League and being more on his own thing. Which, if DC is trying to make that move, I think it's a really smart move, because if you separate Batman from the Justice League, you kind of give a little more worth to everyone else. And I was joking earlier today, but it's like oh, it's Batman 75th. I'm looking forward to reading about Wonder Bat and Super Batman, and because there's too much Batman, not enough for the rest of the DC.
Right.
It does feel like if he can take on any of them and do any of that, there's too much weight on him, and it makes the rest hard to justify.
Yeah. It would be nice if they just took him out of the Justice League, but I'm thinking that they look at sales numbers and they say we got to keep Batman in the Justice League.
Yeah, probably. Although it'd be nice if they maybe moved him to more of a Wolverine status, where he's like technically on the team, but he shows up in a couple frames.
To me, he most in the Justice League, because everyone else is so powerful, he most makes sense as their tactical genius. And if they're not using him as that, which I don't think they do in the New 52, but I don't know enough about the Justice League in the New 52. But clearly now it's being run by Luthor, who would think who in theory would be a tactical genius too.
Is he a tactical genius? Do any of his plans ever work out?
Well, there's that. But the whole idea that, well, my older fashioned idea of Luthor, that he can manage to not get taken down permanently by Superman, like that he manages to continue to function and slip through Superman's grip, despite being a mere mortal, makes him a tactical genius. That's how I used to view him anyway. I don't know where he is now.
Which puts him on the level of Toyman.
Well, Toyman probably did not operate a major empire.
Fair enough.
I'm quite taken, because I recently reread All-Star Superman. I'm quite taken with Grant Morrison's Lex Luthor, who is an ego, very clearly an egomaniac. And
oh yeah.
Anyway, I just love that All-Star Superman. And
oh, that's one of the best things he's done, unquestionably. Yeah. Grant Morrison has a really good track record. I mean, the little bit he did with the Authority, the X-Men run, probably the thing I like least that I know a lot of people love that he did was Flex Mentallo, because it's that like metatextual craziness, but like nothing but.
Well, I haven't read Flex Mentallo, but I mean, he was already kind of the second-tier superstar of the Vertigo world, with Animal Man and Doom Patrol. Long before he did this other stuff.
Who was ahead of him?
Sorry?
Who was ahead of him?
Alan Moore, and then maybe Neil Gaiman, and then Grant Morrison.
Oh.
That's how I used to view it. So by the 90s, I was just going into comic book stores and looking for the good writers. So first I would look for Alan Moore, then I would look for Neil Gaiman, and then if there weren't any of them, I'd grab some Grant Morrison. And I think by the time they put Grant Morrison on the X-Men, they realized they were selling more. The good writers were selling more than anything else. So that's why they made what at the time was a radical move to put someone like Grant Morrison on the X-Men.
Yeah, I just wish they started a couple months later. Because he left the Authority like right then and there to go for Marvel, and so like there's this Authority arc that never got finished. There was this huge delay, and so the next writer that came in like tried to play off it, and it literally killed the series.
Well, anyway, there was something I was going to ask you more about. I feel like Grant Morrison is now kind of dead.
Dead?
He was kind of the god of DC, and then New 52 happened, and his Action Comics didn't really take off, and Batman Eternal, although he killed off Damian, other than that was kind of sidelined, and now they're just going to have him do Elseworlds, basically, when he comes back with Multiversity.
Well, that Multiversity thing they've been talking about for years, so I can only imagine that thing's going to be a big deal when it rolls around.
I suppose it could be a big deal and take off again, but it might be that Grant Morrison's day is done.
Oof.
He tried a series at Image, and everyone else is making huge waves at Image, and his kind of came and went with almost no one talking about it.
I don't even know what it was. That's a fair point. What was it?
I can't remember. I think it was about a serial killer or something.
Oh,
Who
huh.
like had hallucinations of talking to some animals. I'm not sure. Was it called Happy? Or is that something
Happy.
else?
Oh, Happy. Right. Yeah.
I never read it because I was sick of Grant Morrison at that point, and it didn't sound very good in the description, so I just didn't get it. It just
That's
sounded
fair.
like Grant Morrison doing serial killer or something like that.
Maybe he is because I mean, now that I think about it, like the other people you mentioned, like I can't think of an Alan Moore comic that came out of late that anyone was talking about, or Neil Gaiman, though I don't know if he's even done a comic.
Well, he's trying to do Sandman, but he picked a very slow artist.
Oh, that's right. No, yeah, there's those two issues, and then
Sandman
it,
Overture.
oh, yeah, woof.
So, I mean, that was selling well, but I think Grant Morrison, Alan Moore has kind of purposefully made himself so peripheral that people don't even notice what he's putting out anymore. He does put out stuff, but
Hmm. So he's like Steve Ditko.
not quite to Steve Ditko's level yet. I kick-started a Steve Ditko comic book, and I got it. And boy, was it marginalizing himself. At the end of the issue, it had a story that just attacked comic book fans. And I'm like,
Oh,
wait a minute! I just gave you extra money for this comic book to help you out, and basically you're attacking me in this comic book.
that's good. Yeah. The more I read up on him, the crazier he sounded.
Well, I suspect he's very crazy at this point. But he has a right to be. I mean, he's an elder statesman. I mean, he must be in his 80s, I assume. At least he's still trying to produce something. I don't think Stan Lee's doing anything, but just getting people to pay for his signature. Putting his name on products every now and then.
He has a charity. Well, I guess the last thing I wanted to ask was I kind of mentioned like Batman Year Two, and what I was wondering if you had any other Batman favorites you wanted to talk about. I guess you brought up the Legends stuff before.
Yeah, but it's been so long since I've read it. I need to reread those things. So I may say, "Oh my God, I can't believe I made Matt read those." Once I reread them.
Well, I read it. What was interesting though is there was one you didn't recommend, which was the first one, which was Totems or something. He was dealing with a Inuit lady, and there's
Was
like
that a Denny O'Neil one?
Hmm?
Was that like Denny O'Neil with Ed Hannigan or someone trying it?
Yeah, it was not very good. But
I
then when I
didn't
got to
like
the
it
ones
at
you
the time.
recommended, it was so much better.
I remember not liking it very much at the time.
Well, it's funny too because that kicked the whole thing off, and I'm like, oh man, I can't believe the series survived. It had to be a very different market back then if that book survived on that 5-issue arc.
Well, Denny O'Neil was a kind of a star at the time, and I think they intended Venom to be the first one. And I heard an interview with him, and there was some reason why it got delayed, so he very quickly wrote that Totem one.
No.
But yeah, I remembered not liking it very much, so I didn't mention it to you. It's amazing that I can remember what I thought about these things at all. Although I think I can remember the first Marvel comics I read in the 70s better than anything. Which I guess it makes sense because those were the first comics I read, and I only, I would reread them for a month or two before I got another comic book.
Oh yeah, so you didn't just read it, you embedded it.
I embedded it in my brain.
I was reading a earlier Thor comic today. It was pretty funny given the recent news where he has this line where he says, this is a job for a man.
Who does he say that to?
Sif.
Oh, poor Sif. Well, why don't... the thing that I've been doing, other than just reading current Batmans, is I've been slowly rewatching randomly Brave and the Bold, the animated cartoon.
Yeah.
There was a cool one there where they had to go through time and keep various Batmans from different periods of history alive. So somehow Batman was related to a caveman who was dressed up like Batman and a Roman soldier dressed up like Batman. It was very wacky, but it made me think of Grant Morrison. I don't know which came first, Grant Morrison's time travel or that Brave and the Bold.
Probably the other one, because Grant Morrison based all his stuff on older stuff.
Right,
So.
but the Brave and the Bold cartoon isn't that old.
That's true.
I'm not sure how old the episode I was watching was. But anyway, it's a lot of fun and is another way to do what Grant Morrison was doing in the sense of incorporating everything from Batman's history into one show. But they just don't care about reality at all in that show, which is a lot of fun. I assume you've seen Brave and the Bold at some point.
I've seen a couple episodes. What actually helped launch me into a lot of this Batman stuff was I played the Arkham video games.
Which I have not.
Right.
Well, I have not tried.
I
did have an iPad version of... No, that was Injustice, an iPad, but it wasn't.
Oh, yeah, that's the whole thing. But the Arkham video games tie to a lot of comics, and in there they'll have, like, I don't know if you remember the old, like, trading cards and stuff, but they'll have little bios of the characters, like first appearance, a major appearance, a little bio.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to go back and read up on a couple of the characters I've never read. Like, I've never read a Anarchy story. Cool.
I, for some reason, thought he was a new character, but...
He's definitely appeared before, but maybe not majorly.
Do they in the game give you these cards that actually tell you the real first appearance in comics?
Well, it's something in a menu, but yeah.
So you could actually go into that menu and dig up the histories of these people. Then.
Or just go onto Wikipedia, just if I remember the character's name. But
well, I mean, if you're in the mood for something that doesn't take Batman seriously, I think Batman Brave and the Bold just plays with all the DC history going all the way back to the Golden Age and up to the present, and it's just kind of cool to see all the little bits they play with.
It's cool, and they have a lot of crazy stuff. Like, I know there's that Birds of Prey episode that Gail Simone wrote, and she wrote the song and everything.
Really? I guess I haven't seen that one yet, or in my rewatching of it.
That was one of the episodes I watched because I heard Gail Simone was all over it. I had to go watch it. It's an interesting cartoon. Like, when I'm in the right mood, I really enjoy it, but it's hard for me to watch something that kiddie and appreciate, especially because for me, like, even when I was a small kid, I grew up with Batman the Animated Series.
Right.
Before anything else. Like, the first comic I ever bought was the Batman Adventures spinning off of that. And so it's hard for me to take Batman lighter than that.
Well, consider it a new level of being a grown-up when you can get past that having to take things that used to be silly seriously and go back to taking them as silly again.
I think I could take it.
Appreciate the richness of the silliness.
My favorite Batman movie is the Adam West one. So.
Well, there you go. So when you're in that mood, I mean, I think you'll probably get even more out of Brave and the Bold than me because you've dug deeper into all of this.
You've probably read more Batman than I have still.
No. I don't. Well, not in a concentrated way. I was always dipping in and out of I always liked Batman, but there was always so much Batman, and I always kind of dipped in and out of it.
Well, that's fair.
So, anyway, why don't we end it there? I mean, I seem to be dipping deeper into Batman now, partially because of you, and you and Joshua Hayes, I think, are particularly influential on me at the moment.
Yeah, I just found him in the past month, and man, that guy. We need to have a bat chat with him. He'll know what he's talking about.
I would like to. The three of us are Maybe not even including me, and maybe
Get him,
um,
Minutia Minute, and Sean Riaz. There you go.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, he really spends a lot of time thinking about Batman, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, I'd like to rehash my Spider-Man versus Batman with him and see how that goes.
Are you still on the Spider-Man side then?
I will always prefer Spider-Man to Batman,
Uh,
especially now that Superior is over. Now that we're back
oh,
with real
the long.
Spider-Man, I'm feeling like I'll probably be reading less Batman now.
I mean, I once thought I would always like the Fantastic Four, but that's not true anymore.
Well, that's sad. Although that's a harsher test, I feel.
Nothing lasts forever, I guess. Um, anyway, on that note, we'll no doubt do overly long live videos again sometime. Thank you
Sounds
very
great.
much, and good night, everybody.
Good night.